Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hey, Pete. We're back. Films and Stuff. How are you today?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
Well, Pete, I got to admit, I'm a little bit sleepy today because I was up late watching The Last of Us because episode 7 is dropping tomorrow. Are you all caught up on it?
I am. I've really been enjoying it. How about you?
I love it as well. But, you and I have talked about zombie films for many, many episodes. And I think this one's going to be a little bit different because we've got a special guest.
That's right. That's right. So it's no surprise to our listeners. I've been utterly infatuated with The Last of Us. I've actually said that for 2023, this is probably the first must subscribe for Films and Stuff.
That's right.
And we all know I generally hate zombie movies. I hate zombie shows. I hate zombie video games, primarily for two reasons. One, in the past 10, 20 or so years, they've become so pervasive. I actually think they're a bit cliched. And maybe more importantly, I'm also a big baby and scaredy cat, and I don't like being scared by something I see on screen.
I'm with you.
So despite all of that, though, I'm all in on The Last of Us, probably because of Pedro Pascal, but also mostly because it's a really good show that isn't really about zombies, or at least not so far. So to that effect, today we've got with us a very special guest. We've got Dr. Hana Gala. Hana is a tenured professor of business management from South Seattle College. She has previously worked with Fortune 500 companies and has extensive experience in applied research with her insights and behavioral patterns. Everyone give a virtual round of applause for Hana.
Thank you, Dr. Hana, for joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. This is very exciting, especially because I can't believe you don't like zombies, because I am 100% with you. I hate zombie anything. It scares me. I just can't believe that I'm on a show talking about zombie show that, but here we are.
Exactly.
I give a lot of credit to Pete because I would not have picked up on this show. I never played the video game, and I'm sure we'll talk about how it's based on the video game and whether we think it's an accurate, depiction of that. But when I understood that it was about post-apocalyptic zombies, it didn't even cross my mind that I would be interested in this show. So credit to Pete for convincing me to give it a try. And I have to say, I'm pretty hooked on it now. And looking forward, since apparently a season 2 has been greenlit also.
That's right. It goes without saying, but blanket spoiler alert for this entire episode. We are going to be talking about not just the impact of the show or perhaps the deeper meaning into the show, but also, of course, there are some salient plot points that if you don't want to get spoiled, you shouldn't listen to this now. Go watch the 7 episodes that are out and then come back and listen to this.
So Dr. Hana, what's captivated you about this show? How did you get so interested in it?
Great question. Again, especially because I don't like this whole genre. I don't know if I would call myself a scaredy cat, but I really struggle with horrors. I try to stay away. I am one of those people who firmly believe that I can't unsee. And why would I put myself in that situation? It doesn't really give me any relief. It's not my thing. But I have a child, and he was talking about it, and his friends were talking about it. And I thought, well, okay, let's give it a try. And from the first episode, I was hooked. And I didn't know that it was a video game, because I'm old as hills, apparently, in this, climate. I am totally hooked now. I can't wait for the next episode. I am counting hours. It's really, I think you were talking about this on your show too. It became this event where it's the one show where people, just like with Game of Thrones or other shows, people would just it's a, what do you call it? It's like we gather and everybody watches it and then we all talk about it, right? It's like that kind of
must see TV.
Exactly.
Yeah, it gives us something to sort of connect, which I think is part of the appeal. I think there are other things why it's sort of picking up on this zeitgeist, and we can get to it. But yeah, I kind of came to it almost by accident, just guided by my son and his buddies, and I'm not leaving.
Do you think it has something to do with the format of the show? Because the format of the show, every episode is a little bit standalone and kind of introduces some new characters, and then those characters, for the most part, aren't making an overlap into subsequent episodes.
I think that might be part of it, although I kind of like that the show is really innovative in the sense that they are not necessarily, like, by episode 3 or 4, I thought, okay, so there will be a new character and we're going to get to meet them. And then we will kind of have this insight into their lives, and then somebody will die, probably those, kind of side characters, and we will move on. But it's not necessarily what's been happening. I mean, yes, but not necessarily. And there are recurring characters and coming back. And I think that because they also play with the timeline going back and forth, I think that's giving it a little different dimension. So I do like the format, but I think there would be almost another discussion altogether talking about how sort of we have now migrated from movies were the thing to talk about and to see. And I remember being a kid and every Thursday kind of waiting for the new movies come out, and that largely migrated to the smaller screen, right? Like we don't really have movies like that anymore.
Yeah. Pete, what's captivated you about this show? It's not the zombies for sure. What is
Definitely not the zombies. So I would say in general, I think most people would know that I'm quite a stickler for things that are in an established universe or in an established IP. I'm typically a stickler for following source material, especially if that source material is really good. So, and that's been my number one sticking point for a lot of the MCU movies, for a lot of the DC comic movies. It's, when you start taking creative liberties that are almost antithetical to the purpose of that character. I think that's one of the issues I had.
Oh, we're going to talk about Halo. We're definitely
going to talk about Halo, but like, for example, the one of the more egregious examples I can think of in recent years in the big screen was with Ready Player One.
Oh,
great
man.
book. And
do not go there.
The movie was not bad. It was nostalgia overload. It was like a great trip back to our childhoods and our adolescence. That's fine. But I think they made some creative decisions there that didn't sit right with me.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about most movies or TV shows that are adaptations. In this case, I like this show particularly because I played the video game, The Last of Us, back when it came out like a decade ago. And again, I hated zombie games. The narrative of the game itself was quite excellent. And what I like about this show is it's been very, very faithful to the video game. And the things that they have changed, and I'm not talking about superficial thing like, this actor or this character was white in the video game and is now Latin or whatever or black or Asian or whatever. None of that. I mean, things that are narrative changes that were very subtle. Those are A, very minor changes, and B, they only help to add to the story and make it really a much more compelling watch. And what I like is that, in this last episode, so at the time of filming, 6 episodes have dropped. By the time you hear this, the 7th episode of The Last of Us will have dropped. For example, they introduced a character in a very quiet and quick, subtle way in episode 6, who may or may not be, we don't know yet, but I've already started thinking is possibly one of the more central characters in season 2, i.e. the sequel, the into the second video game.
Who's that?
I'm not going to say...
What? You can't
Yeah.
even spoil it for us?
No, it's not even a spoiler because I don't know. So there was
Oh,
when Ellie is in the mess hall and
yeah.
there was that girl who was kind of looking at her furtively, but we're not
Oh.
sure. If she's who I think she is, she's going to play an integral part in season 2.
You're so good at picking up on stuff like that.
Again, only because I've played the games.
Yeah.
In this case, only because
Interesting.
of the game. So that's what I like about this is it rewards people who have played the game. But having said that, if you've never played the game before, it doesn't hurt you. It still holds your hands, walks you through a great, compelling narrative. And then on top of that, on the flip side, having watched this TV show, you don't have to go play the video game, but if you do, you'll also start to understand a lot more of the nuances. So it's one of those rare situations where both forms of the media actually complement each other very well. Unlike, for example, Halo. Which we saw last year, which
also
was
on HBO, by the way. Also
no
on HBO.
Paramount.
Oh, that's right. It was on Paramount.
So it was anyway. So that's what's got me going.
Okay.
It sounds like you didn't like the Halo. I'm just like picking up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to hear more your take on the Ready Player One because I loved the book and I liked the movie just fine. I thought that it was pretty fun, but sounds like you have a whole, episode maybe there.
Yeah, look, it's not even a full episode. It's super small. It was when I was younger, Iron Giant had come out, and he plays one of the main, almost like a Deus Ex Machina role in the third act of Ready Player One, the movie. And it doesn't make sense because the whole point of the Iron Giant was that he was supposed to be this gentle giant who didn't want to fight, and that he only fought because he had to. Whereas in this movie, and that was the original source material, whereas in the movie, he was basically created as a weapon of mass destruction and used as a weapon of mass destruction. It just felt a little off. Whereas everything else kind of seemed appropriate. That was just the one jarring thing that kind of made it seem a bit off.
I'll tell you why I didn't like Ready Player One, but then I'll compare it to why I do like The Last of Us. And I thought that Ready Player One, when you read the book, it was supposed to be very exciting at the end. Like there was a deep sense of like unknown and a lot of anxiety in terms of whether he'd be able to pull off his plan. And I thought that level of pacing wasn't present in the movie at all. All the suspense I thought was gone in the movie. Whereas when you read the book, it was so hard to put down because you kind of wanted to see how this master plan, first you wanted to see what the plan was, then you wanted to see if you could pull it off. So I had a problem with the pacing, whereas I think the pacing in The Last of Us, which we're watching now, is exceptional. It's not too slow. There's enough action to, kind of keep you engaged, but it is not really a zombie movie. It's more a relationship-based movie and all the kind of like ancillary events and relationships. So I think the pacing of this is really what's kind of like keeping me interested. And one of the things I read was that this was originally supposed to be a 10-episode season, and HBO decided to collapse the first 2 episodes into one, reducing it to 9 because they thought that the first 2 episodes were really long and a little bit drawn out. And for people like me and maybe Doctor who hasn't seen or hasn't played the game, it was not engaging enough. And if you kind of look at the synopsis of episode 1, everything happens in episode 1, from the apocalypse to moving to the QZ to escaping the QZ and finding out that Ella is apparently immune, right? So I mean, that's a lot of action that took place just in episode 1, and I think that's what kind of like drew in the non-video game players, because then we kind of saw everything that was on the table, and we were ready to kind of move forward with the story after that.
That's a good point. I actually think that happens very often when we know the original source, right? Like I know the book, so I know where you're going with this, and it's always harder to kind of watch something that you already know. But I will say the things, I think the original question was, what do you like about The Last of Us? And I 100% agree. The first episode, I think, was hands down the best writing. And I always go for writing because it's both the execution, which is phenomenal. This show is really wonderful, but there are little things in the writing and then the big things, right? So The Last of Us, I think, has been so successful because it operates on different levels. It gives you this, like, a human story, which is beautiful, right? The sort of the archetypal anti-hero, and then you have the relationship that it's forming with the girl, and their relationship, their chemistry is phenomenal. So you are so invested. But there are little things, like I watched the first episode, and when they have the footage, or somebody says, there's at the very beginning, there's TV news or there's radio, and they're talking about the mill in Jakarta, right? And they mention, like, outbreak in Jakarta. And then 2 episodes later, Joel and Ellie are walking, and he's like, yeah, it was you never see them eating anything that would be starchy or, made of flour. And he mentions that so she goes, so it was the flour, right? And he goes, or a pancake, because that's what he forgot to buy. And that's why they didn't get in. Like, there are little things like that I think works just so well, because it tells you that these people, the writers really spend time thinking about it. So there's this, like, or for me, as a girl, I always look at how the character is drawn and the practicalities or logistics of being in the apocalypse. I think they got it just so well. When Ellie goes in, like, is it episode 3? She goes down to the basement of the abandoned building, and she finds a box of tampons, and she's like, yes, score. And she's just so excited because life doesn't stop, right? Like, you're a 14-year-old girl. That doesn't, like, it will still happen regardless of your, surroundings. And I think that that's just so, that what gives the show the appeal, that it's so well thought out. But then I think it also works on that level where you see people, I think that one of the themes that they are really portraying very well is the circumstances change people, and even good people end up doing bad things. And even good people, under enough stress, will do horrific things. Like Melanie Linsky's character, Kathleen, like, you can tell that she wasn't a bad person. Like, she had this great brother, and it doesn't seem like she used to be who she became, right? But then nobody has been, right? Like, that's the problem with apocalypse or zombies, attacks. And so it has those themes that make you think and are beyond that story. So that works really well. And the third level is sort of why we are drawn to this. And that's more about sort of something that when we started talking, I was like, I would love to discuss this angle, which is, again, that zeitgeist. Like, why zombies? And why do we have this revival of zombie everything, right? Like The Walking Dead, all the spin-offs, and, Shaun of the Dead. And, like, there are all these zombie movies that it just wasn't the time, 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And it seems to be picking up on something sort of culturally, or as a society, we're drawn to this. And there are several much smarter people than me kind of talking about why zombies and why is it that we are drawn to it. And some of the ideas are because the zombies are almost like a representation of the loss of meaning that a lot of us experience, or we experience as a society, right? So the zombies are just so dumb as characters, right? Like, they are not characters. All they do is to try to eat brains. Like there is no, when you have a vampire, or like there's the need to live forever, or there's like this idea behind. Zombies have none of that, right? Like they're shitty from the beginning to the end. Like there's nothing, there's no meaning, there's no purpose, and they're kind of like drift. And some, there's a Canadian philosopher or neuroscientist, actually, John Vervaeke, and he talked about this like 10 years ago, about the zombies and sort of how they don't have a purpose, and there seems to be something that we recognize almost as if it mirrored a little bit we as a society, not you and I, or like there's that sense. And so I think that it also works on that level. It's multidimensional, and it's freaking greatly done. Like the execution is just stunning. The production is phenomenal. So I think there's a great value in that. It's great entertainment.
I think you've raised a really good point, because there is something to that point, which is the last, I say 2 decades, but only because I'm including video games as that form in that medium. But if you're looking at just television, I'd say the last decade in particular has been inundated. And of course, I'd say like 60-70% of that is because of The Walking Dead. And then you've got a lot of these zombie shows, which are, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that they're as popular as they are, because I agree with you. I think when I think of a zombie show, I think that the zombie itself as the stereotypical bad guy is a really bad guy.
It's boring AF. Like,
yeah.
Sorry, but it's just boring.
Yeah, they're obstacles. They don't have tactics. They're not there to, and I'm not trying to make this sound like, well, I want my bad guys to have strategy and vision. No. But I mean, in the sense that 9 times out of 10, you're more interested in seeing a zombie show for the interplay amongst the non-zombies than you are with the threat of zombies. If you look at Shaun of the Dead, what made that movie funny, or what made that movie great, was that it was the absurdity of the humor and the situation that they were in, where all they wanted to do was get to the pub and have a pint and hold up there, even though there was all this massive destruction going on. But you kind of see something similar here with The Last of Us. And I guess for me, it's because I played the video game, and again, because I like Pedro Pascal so much, it's that I like seeing the interpersonal relationships. It's a good drama. I think my favorite episode of this series so far was actually the 3rd episode, where we do the flashback with Nick Offerman, where we learn about
Frank
and Bill.
Yeah.
Oh.
I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was really good. And, again, a lot of noise gets
What a love story.
Fantastic. One of the best love stories that I've seen on screen, without it being a sappy, like rom-com where like Matthew McConaughey is chasing Kate Hudson for 10 different reasons, right? It felt genuine, and it felt real. And a lot of that feels real and genuine. And again, there's a lot of noise in the fan circles about, oh, well, I don't want to see this kind of representation, blah, blah, blah. And forget about all that noise. Has to just disappear, right? If you have to criticize the show, criticize it for valid reasons, not because you don't want to see 2 gay men on screen. That's ridiculous. What I really like is, and I think you're hitting on that point, is that there is a sense of relatability in those relationships that we're seeing, and it feels authentic, even though, of course, they're being chased by zombies, which is thoroughly inauthentic.
What do you think of the depiction of Ellie by Bella Ramsey?
I love her. I have to come clean. I gave up on Game of Thrones at the end of the 2nd episode, or maybe 3rd. I was okay, I cannot handle this. I know, and it's a cultural phenomenon. I don't even know how I met.
That's a big admission.
I know. It's actually a, cultural suicide, but you know what? I'm a big girl. I can handle it. If you don't like it, so I didn't see her in it. I saw some clips, but I didn't know her from that. I saw her in Lena Dunham's movie last year. She played a lead in a movie based on a book, Lady Called Birdie or something. Somebody look it up. And she was just really great. And in this, I love Pedro Pascal just as the next woman, man, or child on this planet. But I think that Bella Ramsey is hands down who really sells the show and does so much to make it relatable, believable. And I love her in that role. I think that she just has this ease, and she seems very natural and comfortable. And yet she is a great 14-year-old, right? Like, she is also uncomfortable and scared, and it's heartbreaking. And again, the show is really good at showing you, like, at the beginning, she almost creates there's this affinity with Tess at the very beginning. You're like, oh, they're like, she's so hungry to find somebody because she's alone, right? Like, she's just so desperately lonely. And then, they yanked her away. And then there's this relationship with Sam and Henry, and she kind of bonds with Sam, and then he turns. And it's just like, I think that I love Bella Ramsey in this. And I think that she's just, it's funny. I asked my son, why does he like the show? And it was his first answer. He's like, 'cause it's told from the perspective of a kid. And so it resonates because there's a lot of things that they get really right about kids in those situations. They're not tokens. They're not, she's a really well-written character.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting that her perspective, because she was kind of born after the apocalyptical event, right? She's so interested and excited by, like, the little things, right? She's excited to be in a car, the idea of being in an airplane, like all these things that, Joel, Pedro Pascal, kind of takes for granted and doesn't even think about. She's just, like, amazed by, like the windows in the car and the glove box. It was like, I thought that was really genuine to see. Yeah.
Like, we take them for granted too. Like, I think that's what the show does so well. In the last episode, when they're kind of riding on the horse on the campus of wherever it was, and she's asking, like, so what were people doing? And he goes, well, they were finding themselves. And she goes, wait, what? What? Like, I don't, like, it's so great to see her, like, I don't even, like, this does not compute. What are you talking, like, what did they have to worry about or find themselves? And I think that it's really great to see, to kind of, I think that's where you go. That's why I love the movies, because, or, art. And if I may, I don't want to hog the mic too much, but something that, Pete, you were talking about, the episode where Bill and Frank, we see their story, right? Let me start this way. So I work with clients. I teach business management, but I also work as a coach, and I have clients. And one of my angles, I have, tons of tools, but I'm a firm believer that very few people can actually think their way into being better. So art and martial arts, being outside, like all these other things help us in this process of self-discovery and self-mastery, or whatever you want to call it. Movies are phenomenal help to me because I can start a conversation and create this space where people, at the beginning, everybody is, like, really worried about how it sounds, and they will tell you the movies that they like because they think they are supposed to like them. And then, eventually they kind of get more comfortable and start talking about the movies that they actually like, even if it's like a shitty, 90s rom-com or something. And they're like, yeah, but I like it. And I think that's when you start kind of peeling it off. My point being, art in its pure form tells you something that transcends the story, right? You recognize something. So yes, in this case, they're two gay guys, but they fall in love, and the relationship that lasts a long time. And there are all these little things that a lot of people can recognize or notice and be like, oh yeah, we do that, right? And it doesn't matter what the gender or whatever it is. I was thinking one of my favorite movies of the last decade would be Call Me by Your Name. Do I relate to a teenager who's discovering his sexuality? Really? Did I spend my summers in an Italian villa? Not really. But that deep down underneath it all, there's that heady first love and going all in and just being really invested and going for it, whatever it takes. That I think a lot of people can recognize, right? Like, and feel like, yeah, I know that. And that's why I think the best art helps you kind of feel less alone and less frightened. I think that's to me at least, that's the power of great art, when it transcends your experience and it connects us on some universal level.
I love that point. I think that's exactly right. And Pete and I talk about it, I think, a lot, but we never probably put it into like such clear terms, which is we love entertainment for the same reason, that it should teach us something, it should inspire us, or, like plant the seed in our mind. And I think, at least when I watched that episode with Bill and Frank, Bill was a survivalist. And between Pete and I'm probably closer to Bill, but certainly not anywhere near that level. But I was so fascinated watching him like meticulously plan and all the different things that he did. And I started getting ideas like, that's absolutely what I would do if I was faced with like an apocalypse. Like I found that like so educational, like the step-by-step guide. I loved that episode. I thought, the romance was super cool as well, but I just thought the idea of what would you actually do step by step if you're in that situation. I thought that episode was really, really amazing. And I think that this show is captivated me because, for that reason, every episode is kind of like either teaching me something or giving me like a small idea. And it's just letting my mind go wild after that.
I agree. There's always a space. There's always a place and time for one of those movies where you can kind of check your brain at the door and you don't have to worry about it. If you want to go see Fast and the Furious or The Expendables or any one of those movies because you've had a really shitty day at the office and, you just need to veg out for 2.5 hours and see fast cars and, fast bullets and action, that's great. And they serve a very valuable purpose too. But I think that especially in the longer format, like television shows, that's not what you really want. And I think that's what the best streaming programs in particular, and I say streaming because, and I don't want to make this sound bad, but like generally speaking, on those alphabet channels, the ABCs, the NBCs, the CBSs, you tend to get here's 30 minutes of quick sexy action or quick sexy humor and you move on with your day. They're kind of like, we always call it like the fast food for the mind, right? Whereas I think the streamers have said, look, we don't have those financial constraints. We don't have those, time constraints that networks have. If we need the show to be 48 minutes or if we need the show to be 68 minutes, we can do that because there's nothing stopping us from doing that. There's no advertising. There's no fighting for airspace. And that's why, you're starting to see shows now on these streaming platforms that I think in terms of quality, in terms of, the value add that they bring in terms of entertainment is far superior to what we saw on traditional network television. That's not to say network television is bad, not at all. In fact, we've seen some fantastic shows like Mad Men, Breaking Bad, etc., all start on network television. But I think the next evolution of that we're starting to see now on the streaming platforms.
So do you think this is going to kick off a wave? I mean, we've already seen a lot of video game adaptations, but do you think the popularity here is going to kick off like a whole new wave?
I think what it gives you the opportunity to mine this. This show is a good example of you taking an established IP that's not a novel or a comic book series and then making it fantastic. I don't know if this is going to kick off a wave, because even outside of streaming platforms and TV shows, video game adaptations, generally speaking, are very, very hit or miss. And by hit or miss, I think they're more often misses than they are hits. If you think of all the movies and all the TV shows that are based on video games, and I'm not talking animated, I'm talking like feature television or feature movies, almost all of them have been stinkers, right? Halo was bad in recent years. The D&D movie from decades ago, although a new one's coming out now.
The new one looks terrible.
No, terribly good, I think you mean.
No, I don't. I mean terrible.
And then, the original Mario Brothers movie from the 90s. All these video game movies have or the Street Fighter movie, the Mortal Kombat movies, all of these movies have been, or TV shows
Assassin's Creed.
Exactly, have been relatively done poorly. And also I think it's because, and maybe this is the cynic in me, it was a very quick and easy way to take a source material and monetize it.
Well, I was going to say that I don't know if it would start a wave, but I think that when you think about how movies are done and what is the production, that makes a lot of sense to me, that somebody who sits in the studio would be like, okay, we sold, 20 million copies. There's an embedded following because it's likely that the people who play will go to see the feature. And so I think that it was also a result of calculations of the studios that wanted to, as you said, monetize on a following or a base, like a fan base that was already established. I just wish that there was a little more faith in new creations than just regurgitating stuff. Can we stop with the remakes already? It drives me bonkers. I hate it so much.
Fighting words.
It's so dumb. Enough.
So next week, we're actually speaking to someone who's an actor, who's also a writer. We're going to be specifically talking about this new wave of reboots and remakes. So tune in for that. But I would tend to agree with you. I think that let sleeping dogs lie. If you've made a good TV show or a good movie or a bad one, whatever it is, I think you've had your shot, and let's move on. I know Robert Zemeckis, I believe, was asked about making a reboot to the Back to the Future trilogy. And he said, absolutely not. Not while I'm alive, not while I'm here will I allow you guys to make or remake this movie. Yeah. It was perfect. For all its faults, it was a perfect good movie. Trilogy. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, a decent trilogy, excellent movies in there. I don't think we need to see a reboot in modern times.
I dab into the arts for my own shop as a coach. And one thing that I have learned is that there's about 5 stories that we just keep retelling in every, in different reiterations, right?
Sure.
And so and I go back to sort of the myth, and not myth as a made up thing, but myth in sort of the Platonic or Aristotelian way. I'm sorry if I'm losing your audience right now, but the idea that myth is something that we instinctively know portrays something true. Right? Something that we recognize as true. And that's whether that's hero's journey or, that's a myth. And yet we kind of know that a child needs to leave their parents' safety and they need to go into the world. And, and hero's journey is one of the stories that we see, or there could be a stranger in a stranger's land. Like, that's a very popular type of story. Shawshank Redemption would be a prime example of that. And I think that I don't know if it's the studios having more balls or if it's people, I hope that it will come with the proliferation of the shorter formats, like, YouTube and such, that there will be more openness to creativity. There's so much talent. There's so much, like, the democratization of the tools. Like, you can make a movie on your phone. So why the resistance to, like, letting people in and letting people, like, is it technology? What do you think it is? Like, you are the pros here. You have all the answers. Because I am flabbergasted. I'm completely confounded. Like, why, with all this talent and all this new blood and ideas and crazy ideas, why do we go back to Mario Kart?
Ultimately, I think it comes down to economics, which is when you have studios that are spending 50 million, 100 million,
Again,
150, or, in the case of superhero movies now, $200 million to make a single 90 to 120 minute long movie. That means that the film has to generate at least double that. And that's just to break even. So, if you're spending $100 million to make a movie, you need to make $200 million to break even. And that doesn't include anything for advertising. That doesn't include any profit, nothing. So at that point, you really have to go and say, as a studio head, I think a lot of people are saying, all right, well, Ethan, I'm going to cut you a check for $200 million to make the next superhero movie or to make the next whatever movie. How are you going to make how are you going to make me $500 million back? And that puts so much undue pressure on Ethan then to come up with a story that can genuinely do it. Gone are those days where you had, or not those days, but I would say there are far fewer studios today, not just because of mergers, but just in terms of overall risk appetite, who would say, all right, here's $25,000, max out all the credit cards you have, spend all the effort you have to do it, and I'll buy the distribution rights for $100,000 or whatever, so you break even on the movie. And if that movie becomes a cult phenomenon, great. That's what we saw with Kevin Smith, where he literally made Clerks for everything that he could buy, put on his credit card. Yeah. And then he followed that up with Mallrats and all the Clerks sequels and all the, the View Askew series. I think we're going to start to see a little bit more of that with the streaming platforms now, because the streaming platforms, I think, have done a very good job of democratizing the access to distribution channels, even though they are contracting now, but also because they no longer have unlimited budgets. So we're seeing Disney is spending $5.5 billion less. Warner Brothers is spending $3 billion less. Paramount is merging with Showtime because they want to synergize on their costs and save some money there. Eventually, they're going to say, hey, look, I can't afford to pay the cast of Succession $100 million for season 4. I would much rather have 5 $20 million shows or $25 million shows. And if one of them becomes a hit, that's all the better for me.
I was actually going to say, as I was finishing my thought, I realized that there is a trend that I noticed, especially last year, maybe 2 years, where there's a crop up. Like there are these movies that seem to be, like, I can't even remember more than 2 or 3 on top of my head, but they were like obviously not expensive to make at all. One was Somebody Runs a Marathon, right? Like there was this movie on Prime, and it was, Samantha Runs a Marathon is the name of the show, maybe, or the movie. And based on a true story, I think it was Prime produced, and it shows up on your feed and you can watch it. And it's actually a really cute, like a good movie, something that you used to see on TV every now and then, be like, oh, I'm gonna watch this, and then an hour later you're like, this was pretty good, and like it made me think, or oh, I enjoyed it, whatever. And there's more of those that you don't hear about. There's no trailers. They only end up on your feed because maybe it's somewhat related to you, because there's that like very personalized, customized marketing, right? Like, so you mention Acapulco in a conversation with a buddy, and the next thing you know, Prime is feeding you a, Acapulco series by,
Right.
with Belmondo or some whatever. Yeah. And so I think that I can see as a trend, right? But it's almost like we lost the mid-level movies altogether. Either it's a tentpole or it's sort of this smaller, very specific kind of niche. Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about it in the past. We're fans of Jared Butler, and he's kind of dominated that middle space, right? Where, the movie,
he's on that plane movie now, right?
The plane movie, which just got greenlit to a sequel called Ship.
Taking our idea. That's taking our idea.
It's
they're listening, huh?
Clearly. I know what you mean, but going back to our original point, I think that, Ethan, to your point, or to your question rather, I think that in terms of video game adaptations, are we going to see more of this quality? I always hope so. I think the next true test is going to be The Division, which I think is an Amazon Prime series, but I'm not sure. That's based also on a video game, to be determined. And of course, you've got the animated Mario Brothers movie coming out in April, which by all means looks very good. So let's see how that goes. But in terms of serious dramas like this, I tend to side with Hana, which is to say, look, established IPs for this kind of series, it's hard to pull off, and it's hard to find one that's as compelling or as engaging as this one has been.
There's also something in terms of the characters, right? Pedro Pascal is he's highly recognizable now, right? So there's also a fine line to walk between finding actors who are well known enough to draw in an audience and accomplished enough to pull off complicated characters, but you don't want them so famous that they overshadow, the title character that they're playing either. I mean, Pedro Pascal, I think, is very rare that he is a household name, or almost a household name now, right? He kind of passes our mom test, that Pete and I have, which is, would our moms recognize his name? Probably, or at least that would sound familiar to them. So it's hard to, someone like Nicolas Cage, who Pete has a man crush on, like Nicolas Cage could not play Joel, because you wouldn't see Joel. That's right. You would see Nicolas Cage, right? But you also can't have entirely unaccomplished actors that haven't been in anything and they're still learning to get their feet around them, because these are really important characters that the audience expects them to act and be a certain way. So I think that's a very complicated thing that they've pulled off pretty well in this show.
If I may, this is kind of a side note, but sidebar. But just the other day, I was thinking, I want to meet the agent who, Pedro Pascal's agent. Can you imagine the clout that guy or gal has now? It's beyond. When I learned that he was cast in the lead, I was like, he's Mandalorian. The fact that Disney would let him go to do this with HBO, that's just wonderful agent work, right? And that they would be okay with it, and he can pull it off even though it's so, Mandalorian and Joel are kind of similar, right? And their trusts in that situation with the, one is delivering a baby, and one is with the teenage girl, but kind of there are some there's some similarities.
That's such
right?
a good parallel.
Yeah.
And yet
the caretaker in both.
And
Yeah.
they are like good with the sword, and they
Whoa.
can fight, and they should. Mandalorian is presumably, you know, much more kind of goody two shoe character, but not really. Like, he's got some dark side too, which is what makes him likable and relatable, right? But they're like back to the agent. Like, I am in awe that they pulled it off. The team, you know, Pedro Pascal, and you know, yes, we all love him. But like, that's a feat, you know, because those characters are not diametrically different, and yet he is both, and everybody is like, oh yeah, he can totally, and he was in Game of Thrones. Like, how amazing. Like, I honestly, I think that he should give his agent 50% on, like, that's just I don't know. I would love to have a beer with that guy, like, or gal. I don't know. I don't know
That
anything about
is
anything,
such a brilliant connection, by the way. It's something that I didn't actually even think of, although that
Which
is a
is
very good
crazy.
parallel.
I didn't pick
That
up
is
on
a
it.
very good parallel, is that, and it's interesting you say that, right? Because like the Mandalorian, we've seen Joel also be gruff. He's a singular force. And he also wears, you know, instead of a Beskar steel helmet, his helmet that's protecting him is kind of his personality, right? Which is, I'm a loner. You're not my daughter. You're nothing to me. That's brilliant, actually.
Oh, you could even go one extra. Like, Baby Yoda's always trying to grab like this little
Right.
ball bearing on his control panel, and Ellie is always trying to have a gun, right? And in both cases, he's always chastising them, saying, "No, like, don't touch
Yeah.
that. You can't have that. Give it back. I control that." It's really interesting, the parallels, now that we've kind of gone down that path.
Yeah. That's actually brilliant.
He's super good in that role.
Well, now we know why you're the professor.
Yeah, that's right. So now we're at episode 6. Episode 7 is dropping, as you mentioned, Pete, tomorrow in real time, but you know, it will have dropped by the time that this episode is released on time. And now they've already said that season 2 is going forward, which I'm happy as a fan to know that there's a season 2. And Hana, if you know anything about Pete's viewing style, he seems to only watch shows where he knows that there's going to be a season 2 or beyond that he can emotionally commit to. But it does take away a little bit of the drama in terms of which character could be killed off. And I guess if you've played the video game, those would not be surprises. Yeah. But I have to say, for me, the way episode 6 ended, how does it go now that I know there's a season 2? Okay, I think that's kind of answered itself, right?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that was a questionable decision on HBO's part. I get that they had to say that because, again, the problem with these big streaming platforms is they also, and not just streaming platforms, but these big studios, is it's no longer an artistic endeavor. It's also a commercial endeavor. So this announcement is, you know, something that they probably made for the sake of their share price, not so much for the sake of their fans, because you're absolutely right. For every 10 people who watch this show, I imagine 5 of them are fans of the video game, or maybe 4 of them are fans of the video game, and the rest are not.
High.
I think so, because it's the first season. I think it'll drop over time, but I think that in general, they were banking on the IP recognition or the brand recognition from the video game. But I think now that we are well past midpoint, I think now more and more people are coming on because it's a good show, not just because it's a good video game adaptation.
It's interesting you say that, though, because I'm looking at the US viewers, and it has gone up every episode, except there's an inexplicable dip for episode 5, and maybe that's just because it hasn't been out long enough to kind of get a lot of views. But I would have kind of thought it was the opposite, which is all the video game fans should have been watching from episode 1, right? And that includes you, it includes Hana's son, and then those video game fans should have been getting the non-gamers, me and Hana, involved after they kind of watched episode 1 and said, "This is amazing. You've got to see it."
So you're right in that regard. I would agree, but I think what's happened is two things. One, I think that number of people that they've been recommending the show has outpaced the actual fans of the show. One. Two, if you've played the game, most video game people will know this. There's a lot of controversy around this series. And that controversy
hold on. What's the controversy?
So the controversy has nothing to do with the quality of the game. The problem has to do with the narrative, particularly in the second game, or which will be the sequel, or season 2. There's a lot of controversy, or there has been a lot of controversy, and I don't want to really go into it because it really will spoil season 2.
Don't do it.
Yeah, exactly. It'll spoil it. And normally I don't care about spoilers, but I also recognize that the show is A, very good, and B, also it's like, why I wouldn't purposefully do that to the two of you, right? So I think that a lot, for every 10 Last of Us video game fans, I think the sequel caused that number to drop from 10 to maybe like 7, maybe 6. They lost a significant number of people because of the sequel, because there was a lot of controversy as to what happened in the game and how it happened. And
nothing's as good as like video game community like turning on themselves and like having controversy,
it is
right?
One of the most toxic fandoms out there. It's crazy bad. It's crazy bad.
Such a first world problem, right?
It totally is. It totally is. And we see that all the time. Last of Us was one of them. Most recently, we had issues with now the Witcher TV show, same thing. Anyway, I don't want to, we'll touch upon this. We'll touch base on this
next year
in season 2.
All right.
And whether we agree or disagree. But yeah, I think so. That's, I think the issue with the viewership numbers is I think that you had the number of people outpacing the video game adaptation, and B, you had just the controversy around it, which caused more of the video game people to be more tepid around it. I'll be honest, I was highly skeptical before the show came out. When it was first announced, my gut reaction was, after everything that's just happened with The Last of Us 2, the video game, you really want to wade into the waters to make this a TV series? We're going to relitigate this whole controversy again. I was against the idea, and I'm glad that they did it because it's a fantastic show. But
so when is season 2 coming out? I mean, we're looking at 2025 then?
I don't think they'd waste their time. I don't think that they'd rest on their laurels. They'd want to expound on that. HBO Max, I mean, as a business perspective, why wait for 2025 when you can probably get, we're still 2 months into 2023. You've got plenty of time to shoot this year. You've got some time to shoot next year and still get it released for next year,
I guess. Okay. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. I mean, let's see how this series ends. They've said they've been relatively faithful to the video game. I have high expectations for how this ends. I'm looking forward to the rest of this series. Again, we only have 3 more episodes, so we're now entering the 3rd act of the video game as well, and in the TV series. So it worked out quite well. The way that episode 6 ended sets up 7, 8, 9 quite nicely, actually.
The numbers you mentioned, sort of 5 out of 10 or 10 out of 10, and now it's 7 out of 10 gamers for season 2, possibly. What I think is interesting is when you do something like this and you take the original, either fans of a book or fans of a video game, there's that built-in fandom, but then you're batting on the
wider audience,
friends, wider audience. And I think that with The Last of Us, they hit the stride so early, and it became so quickly such a phenomenon that they I don't know if there is a sort of a bell curve or, a way to describe this, but it seems to me that they really hit the point where there's going to be more people who are non-gamers coming to the show and watching it and talking about it, because it just sort of transcended that fandom and a close circle around. and it kind of expanded to the greater cultural conversation, which is, I think, partially because of that zeitgeist that I mentioned. And I think that there's like culturally this loss of meaning, and there's something about our need to be united around something, right? And it's no longer religion. It's no longer politics is a mess. Social media works on creating more and more silos and more tribes. And so having something that brings you together with people with whom you don't necessarily have a lot in common may be why we like these shows that like Game of Thrones or Succession, or like these big shows that people can sort of gather around. That's our campfire, for the lack of a better metaphor. And we can talk about it and kind of, again, see what is it that you like about it, and how did you interpret this, I remember being in high school and watching Twin Peaks, and like the next day, just all of us would talk about the episode and like, what did you think that meant? Which, of course, in case of Twin Peaks, is entirely futile activity. But then again, you're a teenager, so.
Can we also give credit or a shout out to HBO, which we've been occasionally a little bit critical about, but they really nailed it with this, right? I mean, this could have gone a
100%.
lot of different ways. And for all the problems that HBO has, I mean, this is really a big win for them. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I give them
at a time when they needed it. Yeah.
Yeah. At a time when they needed it. So I was reading that it was a guy by the name of Craig Mazin, who was the developer of Chernobyl, right? Which was such an amazing series. And he's the kind of the driving force behind, getting Naughty Dog, the video game publisher, on board, and, using his passion to kind of, bring this to HBO, who he obviously had a relationship with. That's a really big win for HBO. That's probably something that you would have imagined Amazon would have been in line for. Maybe it's not right for Netflix. Maybe it could have been Apple TV, but that's really a big win for HBO to bring this in and kind of expand their user base, right? Because HBO's got their little niche, and it hasn't really been known to cater to kind of like the gamer generation or maybe that like age bracket. This is something that probably helped their subscription numbers because, as Pete and I've mentioned, this is kind of a must subscribe show. This isn't the show that you wait for it, or try to find, some way to, mooch your friend's password or something. This is something where you actually go and you put your credit card and you pay for the subscription because you really want to see these when they drop.
I'm the exact example you're talking about. I think I canceled my subscription last year. I don't know what I watched back then, but I was like, okay, I'm done. I don't need this. And I subscribed. Thank you, HBO, for making it easy for me to watch this show. Yeah. And it's exactly what you're saying. Like that's, and again, you can tell that they gave a lot of freedom, but also they really dropped a good money on talent, because it's not just the actors, it's the whole production. Like before coming on here, I was just thinking about, not only is the production value just amazing, but that scene at the end of that episode with Henry and Sam, where Melanie Linsky turns and all those zombies spring out from the ground.
Yeah.
I hate zombies. I think we established that. I'm not the biggest fan of action sequences, but I can appreciate the craft and the art of editing, of the coordination,
the makeup,
sequencing,
the costuming. Yeah.
All of it.
It was just mind-blowing. It was so well done. It was such a great sequence. And here's somebody who's almost, like, I'm 48. I have a kid. I'm like, a teacher. And I'm sitting glued to the screen. And I'm like, holy shit, this is phenomenal. I haven't seen anything like this in a long time on screen. It's a TV show. It's like, I think that's where you're kind of, to me, if this is the point where we go, thank you, HBO, Thank you, HBO is definitely what I would say too. It's art.
Yeah. Pete, do you know how much they're spending per episode on this?
I have no idea, but I bet you it'll be
$5 billion.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it were at least $15 million.
$10 to $15 million per episode.
There you go.
Which puts it in Game of Thrones, the early years range, right? Like up to years, kind of season 6, 7, and 8. Yeah.
And to Hana's point, you can see it. It's not, you can tell that they're not paying Pedro Pascal $15 million an episode because they can't afford it, right? They're paying everyone, not just in front of the camera, but behind the camera as well. Yeah. The writing team, even though the lore is established, even though the IP is established, converting one format of media to another is not an easy task, right? Especially a video game, which is like 20 hours long, and you have all the time in the world to build the world, to build narratives, and to introduce characters, versus a 9-episode TV series, or even, a 2.5 hour or 2 hour long movie. It's not easy to cut all that dialogue out and to make people believe in the world that you've created. And these guys have done it. The set design has been particularly good. Again, I too am not a fan of zombies, but I love the design of the fungus and, the cordyceps or whatever they're called. I love that. The bloaters design in that same episode Hana was talking about, it mimicked very much what we saw in the video game. So you feel that sense of dread you felt when Ellie is trapped in the car with that gymnastic zombie. It's crazy. It's crazy good. It's just all around one of the few shows where you can see that whatever they're spending on it is justified.
Do you think Ready Player One would have been better adapted as a television series rather than a 90-minute movie, despite Steven Spielberg's involvement?
Yeah, I mean, it made a boatload of money, but I actually think it would make a phenomenal animated series.
That's true.
I think it would give them a lot more comfort in terms of controlling their costs as an animated show. You're not bound by a lot.
Can I ask you a question? Since you have been playing the game, what do you think about Ellie and Joel as characters? Like, how do you like Bella Ramsey in that role?
I think she's done a very good job. I think the first 2-3 episodes, she was getting her stride. Like, I kind of fell in for Ellie from the get-go in the video game. But again, because we had more time with her. And in this, I think it wasn't until the 4th episode, when she finds the book of puns and she's trying to convince Joel, like she's trying to make Joel laugh. I don't think it was until that episode where I was all in on Bella Ramsey.
Interesting.
But Joel, I think Pedro Pascal, and I'm doing my very best to be objective because again, when I see
you're in love, we all are. Just admit it.
I think I was all in on him from that moment where at the end of episode 1 where he loses his daughter. I think that's when I was like, yeah, shit, that he's exactly right for this.
I think the distinction I make for Ellie is, do I like the actor playing the character and the role, or do I really like the character? And I have to say, I don't really like Ellie as a character. I mean, she's vulgar, she's gruff, she's like a difficult adolescent to manage, right? So I mean, I don't really enjoy her as a character, but I like the show and I like her in the show, and I like the actor playing Ellie because I think it's a very, very good depiction of probably what that person would be like, being under those circumstances, right? I mean, sometimes you look at a character, Pete looks at any Nicolas Cage character, he's like, I love that guy, I want to be that guy, I would hang out with that person in real life.
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Whereas sometimes you look at a character, you're like, I would never want to hang out with that person. Yeah. But man, I really, really enjoy watching them in this show, even if they make me very angry. And that's kind of how I feel about Ellie, which is I don't really like her as a person. I wouldn't really enjoy her in my life, but I recognize it's a great acting job to, maintain that type of attitude that you probably have growing up in those circumstances where everything is hard, everything is bad, you have really, no family, friends, or any support around you. So I think she's done a great job at that.
It's so interesting because that you say as a person, you probably wouldn't necessarily like her much. I think that I immediately liked her even she seemed to me this archetype of like the last Boy Scout, or, like this when he was a kid, like kind of wise ass, deeply, longing for something, but not necessarily showing it. And like at the beginning when they're somewhere with Tess, she's like, pretending to be a zombie, and she's like, cut it out. And she's like, okay. Like a bravado that she learned to portray in, I assume. And I think she was somebody who probably was like rough around the edges always, but it's also that, yes, she has horrible manners, and it pains me to see bad table manners. And yet, she grew up in the QZ,
Mm-hmm.
like, what do you expect?
Right.
But I think that ultimately her heart is in the right place, and that's all you can ask from a teenager. So I liked her at the beginning, and I think that she would be kind of nice to know in real life. That's so interesting that we have a different take on that.
All right,
Yeah.
Pete, I want to switch gears a little bit, Pete, and ask you about something, because you played the video game and we did not. I gather from the show that there is some, I guess it's like a physical type of neural link between the zombies, where they can kind of detect when someone is there, and then they're able to kind of like alert the rest of their like zombie cohorts and direct them to where to get, right? But this seems to be used a little bit. I feel like this is kind of inconsistently used if you really wanted to kind of like deep dive and nitpick at the show. Are you feeling the same, or you think this is kind of consistent with how it worked in the video game?
No, I think, okay, so this has been a while since I played the video game, but if I remember correctly, even in the game, the idea was they were called clickers because they used echolocation to determine where things are. That's how I recall it anyway. I also think that, and again, this is not about just nitpicking or not nitpicking, but I also think that that's almost irrelevant.
Yeah.
In the sense that the zombies are just kind of a function of serving as, in this case, obstacles, or as the generic, like, things that they want to either kill or avoid. I don't think that, whether they're authentic to the source material or not is relevant. I think I couldn't care less. In terms of looks, they look exactly the same. In terms of feel, I feel the same when I see them. But, even in the game, I think they were just almost like a plot device, not really a valuable source of information or anything like that. Don't hold me to this. And again, listeners, if you recall better, because you've played more recently than I have, leave us a comment below. But I think it's quite accurate to the video game. And of course, don't forget that one of the writers and one of the creative heads behind this is Neil Druckmann, who was the creative force behind Last of Us at Naughty Dog. I don't think that he would want to change anything drastically unless it was required by the studio for, practical purposes.
Okay. When is the next video game coming out? Like, how does that mix up with the release of the second season? Are these going to be like kind of...
Oh, so The Last of Us season, part 2 came out years ago.
Okay. There's not going to be anything beyond that?
I don't think so. I don't know, but I don't think so.
Okay. Do you think that season 2 then of the show is going to be the end of the show, or is there enough material to go beyond that?
Well, that's the $64,000 question. That really is to be determined. I think, look, the way they've structured and the way they've built this world now, and, this is, again, me putting the Warner Media executive hat on, is they've built such a compelling world, or at least a world that we kind of recognize now, that theoretically you could continue this show with other characters in this world that they've created for as long as possible.
Well,
And
then it's The Walking Dead, right?
then it becomes a Walking Dead, this is exactly right. I think that fundamentally the problem, or not the problem, the fundamental reality is that if you're a streaming platform or a TV network, you want IP that you can monetize the hell out of and or prolong the hell out of. I think that's just the way it is. I don't think that they're going to spend $15 to $20 million an episode for 2 seasons and then call it quits. I just don't see it happening. Not for 2. Does that mean they make a 3rd season and a 4th season with different characters or with these characters in a different way? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's why, that's the advantage of also having Neil Druckmann there. Mm-hmm. The way it stands now, at the end of season 2, all the source material is complete.
So episode 7 is dropping. We left off episode 6, where Joel has been somehow stabbed with a broken off baseball bat handle, it looked like, right?
Some kind of shiv, yeah.
They make a fleeting, to the extent you can use that with a horse, a fleeting escape by horseback. And then he just kind of like falls over, collapses, he's bleeding out. And dun, dun, dun. We just kind of leave it there. And episode 7 now is coming.
And again, to your point, there's very little drama created by that for anyone who either has played the video game or for anyone who heard that they've already greenlit season 2.
Yeah.
It has impact for people who are not in the know, but for people who aren't in the know, I think, you're going to be like, wow, I wonder what happens next.
Happy that they did it this way at the end of episode 6 rather than at the end of the season, right? Like that's an old school kind of
that
season ending finale trope, right? Where you're supposed to wait and see like who shot JR until the next season. Like it's a little bit better this way. At least we only have to wait like 1 week. We're gonna find someone's kind of come to the rescue. They patched him up. He's woken up and groggy and bloody bloody blah. We'll move on to the next adventure, right?
I saw, and I'm sorry, I never watch previews, but this one, I don't know how it came up, and I saw a preview of the 7th episode, and it seems like a flashback to Ellie's life in the QZ.
Oh,
and so to me, I'm like, they can let him, kind of keep bleeding on the ground until the next episode, while we kind of revisit, because she's stressed, right? She goes, don't leave me here alone. I can't do this by myself. And she can have flashbacks. It can be the whole episode. And then we'll come back to him bleeding out. And honestly, like, it's so interesting that you were like, well, there's very little kind of drama because we now know that there's another season. I think the way these things are written these days, where you had like, again, didn't watch Game of Thrones, but very familiar with the content, like you can have a like bloody wedding and you can have red wedding or whatever, and you can have one character dying and the second person continuing in the next season. Like I can totally see them killing off one of them. I mean, I don't know anything about anything, but like it wouldn't surprise, like not that it would surprise me, but it's also like, I love that I can go in and have these open, like I have no expectations, like take me. Yeah, if the art is good, you can just go and be like, entertain me. I'm in. Like whatever throw my way, I'll take it. Like I now trust that, like the writers built so much trust for me as a viewer, or with me as a viewer, that I'm like, show me what you got. You want to take me to a kind of reminiscing flashback story for the whole season? Do it. Like, I want to know more about Joel when he was younger, and I want to know more about Ellie when she was younger. Like, whatever.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. Season 3, other future seasons could also be prequel seasons, which is fair enough, which is absolutely fair enough. That's the one thing this show is doing that the game didn't do, is they're filling in a lot of blanks. So, we didn't really, that second episode was like a lot of it was set in Jakarta. Mm-hmm. We didn't really see that in the video game. we knew of the outbreak, but we didn't get to see a lot of the filler. And that's what this TV series has done very well.
Oh, that was a great episode.
Filled in a lot of question marks that people who either played the video game or even if you didn't play the game, you have, because you're just like, how does this make sense? Or how did this happen?
I thought that was phenomenal because within 15 minutes, you're like, okay, I know what happened. I know why there's the craters. Like, again, great writing.
Yeah.
Pete, what is more surprising to you? That we have a guest who's never seen Game of Thrones, or we have a friend who's never seen Star Wars?
Both are equally egregious, but I think
I take umbrage. I think the Star Wars is worse.
I mean, that's almost criminal. That is almost criminal.
I would say this, Hana, I think you get a pass, not just because you're our guest today, but I think you get a pass also because Game of Thrones did something that I don't think I've ever seen or heard of on any other TV show, which was it had 7 unbelievably good years followed by one season that was so bad that it wiped away the goodwill of the previous 7 years in not one season, no, in half a season.
Yeah.
In 6 episodes, they managed to undo the goodwill of 7.5 years of TV, which I don't think we've heard of, Fonzie jumping the shark. Sure, but he didn't take away from Happy Days, or that one episode didn't take away from all of Happy Days. I would argue that the last couple episodes of Game of Thrones took away from all of Game of Thrones, which is unheard of for me.
I read about it. I'm familiar. I just couldn't sit through it. Again, normalized incest with somebody else. I cannot get on board with that. The production, and I agree that it was a phenomenon, but I read about the last season, and I think that you're right that they lost a lot of their fandom.
Yeah. But, again, to their credit, they're rebuilding that goodwill now with House of the Dragon, which,
it's true.
Ethan and I have enjoyed very much the first season, and let's see what happens with season 2 onwards.
I don't mind, for the record, I don't mind being the one who's worse in anything. So if you want to tell your friend that it's okay.
You seem to have a level of remorse. Our friend does not. He's remorseless. He's committed a crime against entertainment, and he's not even expressing any. He's taunting the jury. He's really taunting the jury in his criminal trial for.
Oh, you're misreading. I have 0 regrets. I will never watch that show. No. I'm not going back. No, that ship sailed. I'm out. I'm never going back. And I have no regrets.
Oh, this is closer call then.
It's fair.
So that was a relatively deep dive on The Last of Us. We're going to make it very clear for you. At least as of the time of this recording, this show is a must subscribe from me. Ethan, what about you?
Same. Must subscribe to HBO Max for this.
Hana, our rating scale is very simple. Either you skip it, you mooch and borrow someone's password to watch it, or you subscribe to HBO Max. Where do you fall on this for Last of Us?
Subscribe.
Yeah. So there you have it, folks.
It's unanimous.
A must subscribe across the board. It has a little bit of everything for everyone. If you want action, it's got it. If you want drama, it's got it. If you want relationships, it's got it. If you want zombies for whatever reason, it's got it.
All right. I can't wait for episode 7 to drop.
I'm counting hours.
Thanks once again to Hana. Hana, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you or if they want to hear more from you?
They can find me on LinkedIn under Hana Gala, Gala. And then I also work with a consultancy based in Vienna, Austria, actually, Leadership Associates. And that's a shop with which I do the coaching and all other activities. So leadership.associates.
Perfect. And we'll make sure we put out links to all of Hana's sites and to where you can get in touch with her. So once again, thank you for Hana for joining us on this wonderful discussion on The Last of Us.
Thank you, Hana. Thank you, Pete. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.